I would say Pakistan ought to be near the top of the foreign policy heap. It's probably the most worrisome and difficult foreign policy challenge or national security challenge facing the administration. You've got, I don't know, plus or minus 100 nuclear weapons. You have the headquarters, so to speak, of the world's principal terrorist organizations. You've got a government that is unable, unwilling, or both when it comes to controlling its own territory. You've got a government that to some extent is not a government. It's not in control of itself. Or to add it all up, you've got a tremendous gap or disparity between U.S. interests on one hand, which are enormous, and U.S. influence on the other hand, which is quite limited. And anytime you have a gap between interests and influence, you're obviously in an uncomfortable or dangerous situation. And that's where the U.S. is with Pakistan. It also holds the key to some extent with Afghanistan. So getting the Pakistanis to deal with this growing, what you might call Talibanization of their society, which is bad for Pakistan's future as well as Afghanistan, is something we can urge, but we can't force, and we can't do it for them. So we do the odd predator attack, which to some extent helps, to some extent alienates the society. The real question is whether we can build up relevant Pakistani capabilities, because most of their military capabilities, quite honestly, are irrelevant to the challenge they face. They're based upon some, I think, largely non-existent Indian threat rather than the real threats the Pakistanis face. And it's also not clear to me they have the will. There are large parts of the Pakistani establishment that don't agree that the Taliban represent an existential threat to their country or their society. So I don't see the United States doing in Pakistan anything like it's doing in Afghanistan. I don't see any broad commitment of ground troops. This is a country of 175 million people. We're not going to do that. But I can imagine a war of necessity arising in the context of Pakistani state failure. I can imagine a president of the United States conceivably ordering special forces or airstrikes to deal with terrorists. Or I can imagine a president of the United States ordering special forces in or airstrikes to deal with nuclear materials. So it's not inconceivable to me that sometime during Mr. Obama's presidency, be it 4 if he has 8 years, we could see something of a discrete, you might call it, war of necessity vis-a-vis Pakistan. A Pakistani government that, rather than growing, is facing real economic problems is going to be that much worse off in dealing with its internal political and security challenges. I don't see it. I believe that the Chinese are preoccupied with employment, with the success of their economy. They know they're an underdeveloped country. I don't believe the strategic culture of China is also heavily, I don't believe it's an imperialist global challenge. I don't believe the Chinese, for example, are going to attack Taiwan because, again, what the Chinese know they need are literally decades of stability so they can grow their economy. They still have hundreds of millions of people to move from rural areas into urban areas. They know just how underdeveloped they are. Now, if you're asking me 50 years from now, 75 years from now, could a mature China take a different direction? Yeah, I can see that conceivably. I'm not predicting it, but I can imagine it. And the one thing that worries me about China's political trajectory is what will motivate its people. I worry that the principal motive in China down the road, and again we're talking in decades or longer here, could be nationalism, and that would be unhealthy. And that's the reason that I believe it's important that China gradually open up politically, that China can't simply be a culture based on materialism. I don't believe socialism or communism are going to be its motives. So I do believe it needs greater political participation. But if I were a U.S. defense planner, a lot of things would keep me up nights, and we've talked about some of them, like Pakistan, like Afghanistan, like Iraq, like Iran, like North Korea. China would not be on the top 10 of that list.